All right, welcome back. So let's look at another tool. And to talk more about this tool, I'll introduce a example to you. Now, this example is about a operations manager for Checkerboard Airlines at Port Columbus in International Airport. And this person has increased a significant number of delayed flight departures. This person is trying to ascertain how they can reduce the number of delayed flights. So they as a team, this person, the operations manager, the team that was at the airport, they took a look at what they were doing wrong, and then they brainstormed all possible causes, and they identified several major categories. Now you can see that they had equipment, so they had personnel, um, they had materials, they had procedures, and other factors that were beyond the control, like weather. Once a bad weather hits, there's nothing that the staff can do. So they also put any of the other things which were not in the broad categories and other factors. So you can look at this. They looked at equipment. So the equipment can cause problems because the aircraft is late to the gate. They can be mechanical failures, so the airplane is not in top working condition. You can have personnel or the people problems. So the person that is processing the passengers at the gate is doing a slow job or they're not having a good day. The cabin cleaners were late. They didn't do a quick enough job of cleaning the cabin, and that's why the passengers can't go in. You can have the unavailable cockpit crew. That means that the person that go in and look at the cockpit and make sure that everything is in top working condition, they weren't available to do the job. And then the cabin crew was late. I actually had one once when I was in New York. I was getting ready to board a flight, and the cabin crew was involved in an accident while they were en route to the airport, so they arrived about 6 hours late. And that had a whole cascading effect on all my itineraries going out of New York. Anyway, so the procedures can be another problem. You can be waiting for late passengers. Many times you hear in an airport that the airlines are calling out for these passengers saying, Miss So and so or Mr. So and so, your flight is ready for takeoff. If you don't arrive in a few minutes, then the flight will go. And literally, I've seen people scrambling to get on their specific flight. You can have a delayed check-in procedure in which passengers can be inside the terminal, but that they're delayed due to customs or due to the security checks or any of the problems that they're having. Sometimes I've had people kind of in the rush to get to their gate, uh, lost one of the children along the way, and now they were going back to search for their children in the terminal. So that can be a problem for the whole aircraft, and it can get delayed. You can have weight balance sheet late. That means the weight when the people who are putting the luggage inside the aircraft, when they are done putting the luggage inside the belly of the aircraft, they usually write up a weight balance sheet. And if that sheet doesn't come in, the aircraft can't leave. Sometimes you get a confusion on which gate the actual flight is leaving, and many times I've seen that a flight was actually leaving at one gate and the flight left at a different gate. So all the passengers were confused on which gate to go to. So that's a problem. You can have materials problems. You can have late baggage to the aircraft. One flight came in and the luggage wasn't unloaded in time, and then it didn't make to the aircraft on time. So that's a problem. You can have fuel that never got delivered. Some cases I've seen that aircraft have to be sprayed in really cold weathers so they don't ice up with some kind of a glycol or antifreeze so that the aircraft will have no problems taking off from the runway. And then you can have late food service in which the contractor never provided the aircraft with the food that was needed. That's a problem. You can have other, you can have weather, air traffic delays. You can have catastrophic events like hurricanes or terrorist attack and something of those nature that can delay a flight. All those are reasons for delayed departure or flight. So let's look at what other tools. So that's one tool that is known as a fishbone analysis. So let's look at some more tools. You can have data analysis tools. These tools can be used together for data snooping to analyze data and determine causes. You can also do simulation. Simulation is a controlled environment in which you put different parameters in, and then you can manipulate these parameters to get a certain outcome. Now, it's not the actual event happening, but it's being simulated. You can simulate it in a what they say is a spreadsheet. You can simulate using software. You can simulate it using different models that have been constructed. These models can be real world models, but they're small enough that analysis can be done. So you can do simulation. A process simulation is the act of reducing the behavior of a process using a model that describes each step. So you actually take the real world process and boil it down to a process that can be replicated at a small scale to get some real data. So let's look at an example of the Wellington Fiberboard company that produces headliners, the fiberglass components that form the inner roof of passenger cars. Now, they wanted to identify which process failures were the most prevalent, and they wanted to find out the causes for each one. So, a checklist, I think that's one that we haven't talked about yet, is a what it does is it records what were the causes of the failures, and it essentially puts a check mark on a list. And then you take that checklist and you create a Pareto chart from that data. And then from that Pareto chart, you create a cause and effect diagram that identifies several different problems for the problem. And then the manager reorganizes the production reports into a bar chart according to shift because this manager wants to find out which shift is a problem happening. So here's what how the data is being collected. You have tiers of the fabric, you can have discolored fabric, you can have a broken fiber board, and then as this person is collecting data, you can see that all of that data was collected using a checklist, and now a bar chart or a Pareto chart using a bar chart with a Pareto chart has been created. And as you can see, that C has the biggest uh, rate of happening among all the different defect types. So next you do the cause and effect diagram. You can have a broken fiber board, and then you look at materials, you look at people or personnel, and then you look at process, and then you look at others, and then you say which is the most prevalent cause of that problem. The next step is you create a bar chart. You say the first shift, the broken of number of broken fibers is the least, the second shift has a problem, and now you're trying to pinpoint which shift is a problem happening in. So then you go back in to the manufacturing facility and find out which person or which process is creating this problem. And after this problem has been identified or this problem area has been identified, essentially redesign the whole process. I think we've talked about this a couple of times is process re-engineering or redesigning the process. So the first step in essentially doing that is you have to document the process. And after the process has been documented, you collect data on the metrics that are used to measure how the process is doing. So, for example, in this case, the manager found out that which was the defect that was most prevalent and which shift it was happening. And that was a metric that this person collected. And essentially, it disconnects or identifies that the problem is where the problem is happening. The process analyst or the person that is making the change determines what changes should be made. Now, usually it is said, and the last company I worked with, they say that the best place for any kind of process change to happen is a process owner. That means the person that is working on that process is the first person to be brought in because they have the best ideas on the whole process. and they generate ideas. So they can generate ideas by saying, asking these 6 questions. So they say, well, what is being done? And then they say, well, we're producing these roof liners, and that's what we're producing, and we want to make sure that we produce high quality liner. So they say, well, where is it being done? Well, it's being done after usually the couple of steps before making the liner has been done, and then afterwards we check for it for quality. Well, who's doing it? Well, it is the process owner that is doing the uh, process, but then there's also other people involved in the process. Well, where is it being done? Well, this is being done on the process floor. And how is it being done? Is it done on a machine? Is it done by a person? And so how it is being done? So that's a question. Now, how well does it have to do in various metrics of importance that can be in that? Is it being produced on time? Is it being produced at a high enough quality? So those are some questions that need to be asked. So that's essentially the generating ideas to make sure that the problem can be addressed. The next piece to generating ideas is known as brainstorming. Brainstorming is a process in which involves a group of people that come together that are knowledgeable about the process, they know what is going on, and they propose idea to make it better. They're saying, well, let's try this. How about doing this? So after brainstorming, the design team evaluates ideas and identifies those with the highest payoff. Remember how we had talked about payoffs? Uh, which idea, which decision would give you the best payoff? And that's what a team does after they're done evaluating with brainstorming. So, and then the benchmark. After they brainstorm, they say, well, let's see how this process is doing as compared to some of the other processes that are being carried out in the firm. It could be within the firm, it could be outside the firm. Most of the times, internal information is much readily available. On the other hand, information from outside the organization is much more difficult to come by. So that's again something that the company has to figure out. Now, competitive benchmarking is your benchmarking against a direct competitor. And as I said, this information may not be readily available. So sometimes you have to do some deductive analysis. Well, they're selling it at $10.50. So can we do a reverse engineering of their cost and see where they're spending what and broad processes they're using? So many companies would use that kind of a process analysis to make sure that they can do a benchmarking of their products' pricing and quality against some other products. You can do a functional benchmarking, which compares areas of those outstanding firms in any industry. For example, many times uh, Apple is used as the industry leader when it comes to tablets. And when their product comes out, everybody says, well, that's the benchmark. So they usually are setting the trends in the industry. As I said, the first one is internal benchmarking, compares the organization unit. So if, for example, you could say, well, how is the fabrication unit doing in productivity as compared to, let's say, the metal cutting unit? And that's how you're comparing the two units within the organization. So 4 basic steps. The first step is planning. Essentially, you're planning out what you're looking to benchmark. The second is analysis, in which you're trying to analyze what is being analyzed and benchmarked. And then the third is integration, and the fourth is action. So collecting data can be a challenge. Uh, and as I said, that there's no standard format in which to share information. There's an organization called SCORE, which is Supply Chain Operations Reference Model, and they have the Fortune 500 and big companies as their members. And what they've said is we agree to share data on an anonymous basis on our operations, and that'll be used to compare metrics across the industry. So I'm going to sign off here in a moment, and then I'll give you your question of the day in the next video. So watch out for that.